The following podcast is taken from a live broadcast on Inspire FM.
Any health advice given, whether general, diet, physical or spiritual, is general only and must be verified by your doctor. If you need medical advice, please consult a doctor.
Assalamu alaikum and welcome to the latest edition of the Health and Fitness Show. I am Suliman Rafiq, your host for today, and we are broadcasting live from the studios of Inspire FM on the 16th of January 2020, reaching listeners in Luton and surrounding areas on 105.1 FM. As always, you can join us via the Inspire FM website. And if you prefer to view us as well as listen, you can do that via Facebook. All you have to do is go to the Inspire FM Facebook page and click on our live link. Having your interaction is great, so why not get involved? You can do that by text or WhatsApp on 0777 948 1822, or you can call the studio on 01 582 481822. As you will know, each week we cover different health-related topics, and today we'll be discussing all about what children eat and fussy eating. I'm delighted to be joined by two friends who have a real passion for this topic and area and have done so much for improving outcomes for children in Luton. So just to take this opportunity to thank them for all the work they've done for many years in the local community. So without further ado, I'll ask my guests just to introduce themselves.
So I'm Sarah Wocka. I work as a paediatric dietitian for Bedfordshire Community Health Services.
And I'm Emma Cronly-Dillon. I'm a paediatric dietitian and also a public health dietitian. So we run public health programs that particularly target children and pregnant women in Luton.
Fantastic. Thank you very much for giving up your evening to be with us. As I said, we are live, so feel free to message or WhatsApp on 0777 948 1822. Before I go any further, I did promise this week that I'd give a shout out to my son Ibrahim, so I've done that now. I asked him if he was going to listen, and he said only if I get a shout out. So, you know, I've been doing it for a while now. That's the deal. He's probably turned off now. He's like, that's done.
It's probably watching CBB.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Or investigators. So, as I was saying, we are discussing all around what children eat, and we will also be touching on fussy eating. I actually first asked Emma and Sarah to come onto the show when a little while back there was a news story around a teenager who lost his sight after living with a diet of chips and crisps. It was reported that since leaving primary school, the teen had only been eating French fries, Pringles and white bread, and that subsequently led to him losing his sight. So obviously this is quite a serious topic that we are discussing today, potentially. And more recently, a few days ago, it was reported that 99 out of 100 packed lunches reviewed in a study eaten at school are unhealthy, and parents seem to be ignoring nutritional advice because they were saying that children don't like to eat vegetables. The study looked at approximately 1,300 lunch boxes taken to school by pupils aged 8 and 9, found that crisps, sweets and sugary drinks took precedence over fruit, vegetables and milk-based products. So today's show really is, as always, focusing on positivity and what we can practically do as a community and as parents or grandparents around ensuring that we're doing best for our children, as we all want to do, and supporting them as best we can. So just before we get on to some of the more practical elements for all of the listeners out there, could you just tell us a little bit more about the Family Food First program?
Sure. The Family Food First program is a unique program because it's only running in Luton, so unique to Luton, and it's an obesity prevention program in its essence, but we work with nurseries, preschools, and the local Luton Children's Centre to encourage them to work with families and promote healthy messages. So that's through like a standards-based model, so good quality-based standards which look at food provision, the mealtime environment, physical activity practice, that sort of thing. And we train the staff, and we go in and we audit settings and see how they're getting on. So at the moment we're working with about 26 nurseries and preschool in the Luton Children's Centre. So look out in your nursery and see if there's a certificate, because they'll be accredited, and that means that they're achieving excellent practice in promoting health for your child.
Great. And often we have a lot of listeners who might be involved in early years settings, etc. Is there a way they can find out more information if they're not already involved?
Yeah. So we've got a website, which, to be honest, I can't quote off the top of my head because it's actually on the CCS website, and it's this ridiculously long-winded.
But people search for family.
So if you put Family Food First into Google, that will be the first thing that comes up. So you can have a look there. It tells you a little bit more about the program. We've got resources on there. You can also find us on Facebook and Twitter.
Oh, fantastic!
So yes.
Cool. Often Facebook and Twitter are good forums as well to engage with people,
yes,
aren't they?
exactly. And we're always tweeting new things on there, promoting. We're often releasing, like we have recipes that we release every season, so to encourage our nurseries to sort of use those and promote them to parents. There's lots of things that we promote through Twitter.
Great, awesome. And then just in relation to, we've mentioned the phrase a few times, fussy eating. I mean, as professionals, what would you say we mean when we're talking about fussy eating?
I mean, selective eating, which most people might suggest is fussy, picky, faddy eating, is mainly kind of where children refuse to eat sort of familiar foods, or a large proportion of foods that might have previously been familiar to them, or their diet might lack variety. They may not eat as many different foods groups as we would expect. And actually, fussy eating or selective eating is actually part of a child's development. So it's really common, especially in our under fives. And it's estimated about 10 to 30% of your preschool or school-age children will have an element of being fussy. And in terms of the development, it's due to something that we would call neophobia, and it tends to kick in when children are around about the age of 2. And we get a lot of parents where they'll say, my child's eaten everything as a baby, they had no problems, and they've just hit 2, and I don't know if it's terrible twos. And what happens is it's kind of an innate response that's kicked in, where children suddenly start to refuse things that may be new or something that's in a different way, so it might look slightly different. And this tends to happen maybe more commonly around that age. But the good news is there's a lot of things that you can do to try and kind of get a child through that phase so that they don't become fussy in the long term.
Great. And I think it's quite reassuring to know in a way that it is like there are quite a lot of children out there who are selective in what they're eating and stuff like that, but there are techniques and methods and things that we're going to come on to where you can support your child to kind of explore that a bit further.
We'd say all children go through fussy phases, because I think the mealtime environment or mealtimes are a time where children are exploring and they're learning. I think that's really important for parents to recognise when you start solids and you start to offer your child foods for the first time, that's what it's all about. But children do quickly learn, don't they, that this is it's somewhere where they can exert their control. And it's often an area that's actually quite emotional for parents too, because I see, and I think we both see, that parents, they invest a lot. It's something you can give your child, and you can really see the feedback in the sense that I'm caring for my child, I'm feeding them food, I'm feeding them good food, and I'm watching them grow. So when they start to say, well, hang on, I'm not going to eat that, then that can start to become quite an anxious time. And sometimes a little bit of a battleground. So it's a way that children can start to exert a little bit of control over what they put in their mouths. So it's an interesting time. So I would say a lot of children go through this. It's just, where are they at on the spectrum? Are they just sort of general fussy ones, or some of the children that do come into our clinic can be a little bit more on the severe side because it's starting to affect their growth, and some of them might have vitamin and mineral deficiencies.
Yeah, and the other thing, I guess, as a parent is around, like you're saying, it's a time that you can physically see them enjoying their food as well. So often, you just want them to be happy, and therefore you're just going to give them whatever you think makes them happy, and you don't necessarily want the argument, or do you see what I mean? Or you don't want to go through that process with your child around actually these are good foods for you and stuff like that. You think, you know what, it's been a long day, whatever.
Yeah.
And so what would be really helpful as we go on is to talk about some of those practical tips that parents can take from around how you can introduce a more balanced diet and various different types of foods, rather than just sticking to the tried and tested ones that you've had previously. Sure. I mean, it'd be good to know in terms of some from your kind of knowledge and experience, is there any relationship to what mothers eat during pregnancy and then the child's kind of taste and things like that?
So we was thinking in terms of sort of maintaining a healthy pregnancy, making sure that if you have a healthy diet during pregnancy, there's no specific foods linked directly to kind of if you eat something specifically in pregnancy that child will refuse it later down the line. But I think the key thing really is making sure you've got variety both whilst you're pregnant and breastfeeding.
Yeah, and I think it's also, there's a lot of evidence, isn't there, around the mother's nutrition and how that impacts on your developing baby and what that means for their long-term health. So there's lots of good reasons why mums to be should try and eat a healthier diet, even if it's not something that you were doing before, or you think you need to improve your diet. That's a really good incentive. And I think also for then the future, if you're eating a good diet, then you're going to be an excellent role model. And I think that's one of the key tips we would say is children learn from their parents, particularly in those first early days before they start going off to school and the peer group has much more of an influence. You're one of the biggest role models in your children's lives. So if you're pregnant and your diet's not great, then making some of those small steps before your life gets crazy is a good idea. Start early, exactly. And it has an impact. You're investing in your child's future at that stage too.
Yeah, absolutely. And so just at the beginning there, we spoke about when we first decided that we were going to cover this topic specifically, and it was about the story around the teenager who'd gone blind after surviving solely on a diet of crisps. I mean, from your experience, we're working with families and stuff, what are some of the consequences of not having a balanced diet and having a very limited diet?
Well, I mean, we see children who are not gaining weight. I mean, the technical term is faltering growth, so they aren't gaining weight as you might expect them to. And I mean, in the early years, that can have an influence on their overall growth. We don't tend to see it so often here in the UK because most children are nourished enough to grow well, but nutrition is the driver of growth in the first 2 years of life. So if you're not getting enough nutrition to grow, then it is going to impact on your height potential. So you'll be stunted. But that's quite extreme. That happens a lot more in the third world, the developing world, where you hear that sort of thing happening. But I guess in some extreme cases, that could be a risk. And I mean, we don't tend to see it too often, do we, Sarah, where the height is impacted. But in some cases, it can be an issue. Then there's the vitamin and mineral deficiencies that have a big role to play. And obviously with this lad, which is, it's a very sad story to hear what happened with him, because unfortunately, once they'd actually got onto the fact that he had the cause of his blindness and his deafness, he was also experiencing that, was because of his vitamin and mineral deficiencies, particularly B vitamin 12. It had already been going on for such a long time that even though they've been correcting it, and he's also been referred to, I think he's getting some specialist help now, because they think what he had was ARFID, wasn't it, Sarah?
Yeah, so it's kind of quite a new disorder, and it's something that tends to be managed through specialist services. But ARFID stands for Avoidant Food Restrictive Disorder, so it's quite a specialist in terms of needing sort of help and support. But when we were kind of reviewing the case, quite a lot of the deficiencies happened over a number of years. So it wasn't just 1 or 2 months where he'd had a restrictive diet. This is something that was very much long term, which I think kind of is why lots of the case in terms of his medical needs, I guess, were quite significant and severe. And in terms of the diet that he was having, again, very restrictive. It was mainly beige coloured. It was very restrictive, which is quite rare.
It is quite rare. I mean, he was having ham and sausages, so you would think, oh, okay, there's some meat there. I mean, I think that's, meat is a very nutritious food, but he mustn't have been having it enough, on a daily basis to end up with B vitamin 12 deficiency, because you don't actually need that much B vitamin 12. And if you eat meat, then you are going to get, if you eat meat daily, you should be getting enough. I mean, we don't tend to see B vitamin 12 deficiency. It's usually due to metabolic issues, or because you're not absorbing it properly. It's not because of dietary concerns. So yes, this young lad was having it's a very extreme diet over a number of years. And also I think there was some evidence that maybe he wasn't following the treatment protocol, because they had picked up about his vitamin deficiencies years before some of the symptoms had started to arise, and that had lapsed. I think he was getting injections.
Sure.
So I guess some of the lessons learned there are to follow the treatment protocols. I mean, I think unfortunately some of those kids, because he's now, I think he's 17 or 18 now, isn't he? So when he'd started to have these very severe fussy eating behaviours, there probably wasn't a recognition of ARFID and that this is actually an eating disorder. It's only now becoming known. And I mean, and we're lucky here in Luton because the Eating Disorders Service has just recently gotten some funding awarded to offer an ARFID service. So it's just started. So we're sort of still navigating the pathways there of how to get families into the service and what families are appropriate for the service. But it's really good news, because we know that's really difficult sometimes to support these children with their very severe feeding issues.
Great, sure. So I'm going to broaden it out further, and just before I do that, just encourage our listeners to get involved. They can do that by calling us on 01582 481822, or you can text or WhatsApp us in the studio on 07779 481822. That's 07779 481822. So just from a very general perspective, so your everyday kind of parent who's trying to do their best and ensure that their child is having a balanced diet, and often it's just you want your child to have something, right? So often it's like they're having something, and so that's good for them. But what in your experience, or from what you've seen, are some of the kind of practical strategies that parents could adopt to try and get their children to eat more fruit and vegetables, for example?
Okay. But I think when we were thinking about this, we broke it into two parts, because I think you've got what you should do to prevent fussy eating problems.
Okay.
I think is a good way to think about things, because I think all children will potentially go through a fussy eating period, so you've got to, as parents, be armed and ready for that. But I think that there's lots you can do in the very early days, from when you literally start feeding your child solid food, because you're essentially learning together. I guess that's how I like to see it, because children are exploring that first sort of year of life for a child, when you start solid foods at around 6 months of age, they're really learning about different tastes, different textures, and parents should really try and see that as that's what that time is, that 6 months to a year is an exploration phase. In fact, actually probably the first 2 years of life with food is a big exploration phase, because I think parents do have a lot of anxiety around starting solid food and feeding their child, and kids pick up on that, don't they, Sarah? They really do, and it does, we want meal times to be positive, so that's really one of the big mantras, is try and have a positive mealtime. And if you're starting from the very beginning and you're learning together about how to have positive meal times as a family, because it is going to get messy. It's going to be different to meal times that you'd experienced before children, then starting, thinking about it from the very beginning is a good way to go. So those messages would be, starting around 6 months of age, because children are more developmentally ready in terms of sitting up and swallowing and being able to feed themselves. And I know a lot of people would think, whoa, children feeding themselves, but actually children are able to feed themselves finger foods from 6 months. So we definitely recommend doing that. And you could use things like, from first foods would be soft cooked type vegetables, or maybe cooked pasta, or that sort of thing, things that they could kind of pick up and munch on. And if you're a bit worried, it could be stuff that just sort of dissolves kind of near their mouth or just goes a bit mushy. But I guess what you're aiming for is for them to be able to pick something up and put it near their mouth, because they might not get it in their mouth to begin with, but they're then taking a bit of control over eating.
And so, sorry, because you mentioned there about exploratory exploring kind of period. So what you mean by that is just to get as much different types of foods and vegetables. Is that what you're saying? Yeah,
I mean, to begin with, some parents might want to just feed vegetables. It's very, very common. You see a lot of first foods, particularly if you're going to choose jars and packets and that sort of thing, would be very bland vegetables. And what we're saying is, first of all, you don't need to use jars and packets. You don't need baby foods that are manufactured. You can just use the foods that you're eating. They're perfectly fine for your child to eat. And to not spend too long just giving vegetables.
Okay.
Again, it's recognizing it can be a little bit anxious. Be a little bit anxious starting solids to begin with. So if you want to start off slowly and just offer sort of cooked potatoes and that sort of thing, or mashed foods, there's nothing wrong with starting with mashed foods and doing a bit of spoon feeding, because we all eat softer textures. But you need to move on to foods that are mixed, that contain protein, particularly iron-containing foods, because children do need the variety, and they do particularly need iron from 6 months of age. So variety is key, because they are exploring lots of different tastes. And that's why I think also another pitch for offering family foods and the foods that you're eating is that children become used to those flavours. They'll be able to explore those flavours. And jar and packet foods, they are actually quite bland. They're very, very similar. A lot of the food producers, they tend to put a lot of apple in them because it's very cheap, but they won't declare that on the front of the packet. And there's been some studies, I think First Steps Nutrition did a bit of work, didn't they, Sarah, into jars and packet foods, and they saw that some of them were advertising that they were broccoli and peppers and lentils, and actually the majority of what was in them was apple. So that means you're getting a very bland tasting, similar tasting product. And that's why family foods are great, because I think children then learn to eat the foods that you want them to eat in the long run, essentially. So no need for baby food. That's the message. But I think families are a bit worried because hey, I use a lot of spice in my cooking. And that is a concern. Obviously, children are going to be pretty susceptible to chili. Some of the things you could do is maybe take a little portion out before you put chili. Maybe you'll have to not put chili in from the beginning, or try a few different methods to if you're really a spice person, you might just have to put spice aside for a little while. I mean, in my family, we like a bit of spice, and we're just getting used to, we add spice on at the table. It's not the same, I recognise that, but you still, you can still get a kick. and then when you go and eat out or someone's house, you can have a bit of spice.
Sure.
Another thing to bear in mind is also the kind of window between when you're starting solids. So between kind of that 6 to 9 to 10 month period is a really good time to try and get the textures in, and not leave it too long. So if you leave it past 10 months, that's where you start. If you haven't introduced the textures at that point, there's more risk of children becoming a bit fussier later on.
Yeah.
So get early in terms of getting that exploration and different textures in.
Sure. So that's 6 to 10 months.
6 to 10 months. So really utilising that period of time to really get those different textures in. And like Emma mentioned, lots of finger foods, chance to pick it up, work with the mess, and it will be worth it.
Fantastic. It's quite fun, isn't it, for them? They seem to be loving it, don't they?
And that's why you give them ownership of it as well, because they love to feed themselves. I think most children, you'll see them, they're showing you the cues. I think that's another message for parents to look out for. They're grabbing the spoon, if they're doing all of that sort of thing, they're turning their head away. They're saying, I want to feed myself, or I don't want any more put in my mouth. So really look out for those. They show you what they want, even though they can't talk.
Fantastic, great. So we'll be picking this up further after the ad break, so please do stay with us. We'll be looking at more general advice for parents. We'll also be looking at vegetarian diets, for example. So please do stay with us, and we'll be back after this short commercial break.
Assalamu alaikum, this is Atif Nawaz. Listen to Inspire FM shows in your time by heading over to inspirefm.org or listen on Apple Podcasts or Spotify.
Any health advice given, whether general, diet, physical or spiritual, is general only and must be verified by your doctor. If you need medical advice, please consult a doctor.
Assalamu alaikum and welcome back to the latest edition of the Health and Fitness Show. I am Suliman Rafiq, your host for today, and we are broadcasting live from the studios of Inspire FM on the 16th of January 2020, reaching listeners in Luton and surrounding areas on 105.1 FM. As always, you can join us via the Inspire FM website, and if you prefer to watch as well as listen, you can do that via Facebook. All you have to do is go to the Inspire FM Facebook and click on our live link. Having your interaction on the show makes all the difference, so why not get involved? You can do that by text or WhatsApp on 0777 948 1822. And thank you to the listeners who have been in touch. You can also call the studio on 01582 481822. As you know by now, each week we cover different health-related topics, and today we're talking all about feeding children and fussy eating. And I'm delighted to say that I'm joined by two professionals in this area, and I'll just ask them to introduce themselves.
So I'm Sarah Wocka. I work as a paediatric dietitian for Bedfordshire Community Health Services.
Emma Cronly-Dillon. I'm a paediatric and public health dietitian working for Bedfordshire Community Health Services.
Perfect. And so just before the break there, we were talking about some practical advice for all parents around how we can encourage our children to eat a more healthy, balanced diet. Particularly, Sarah, you were talking about that 6 to 10 month age range, which is really important, and that's really helpful to know about as well. We've had a couple of questions in. One of those, thank you to the listener, was around, can you please give some advice on how to make an older fussy eater child eat healthily? My son won't even try things. And so we're going to come on, I think you were saying, to some more practical mealtime examples of things that we can do.
This is probably a really common question from lots of the parents that we see in clinic and out and about. And I think the good news is 7 is quite an influential age and probably experiencing lots of different environments, which is good. Probably first it would be definitely start small, small changes, not to overwhelm by introducing lots of new foods of different textures at one time. And something might just be to think about about just getting them to have a look at the foods that they might be interested in trying, not putting lots of pressure and absolutely putting it in their mouth. So kind of very much a gradual process. So it might be choosing something when out in the supermarket that might look quite interesting. Maybe just getting a child to just smell something, see what it might smell like and how different foods smell. And if they're okay in looking and smelling that food, you might then want to move and progress a little bit more into maybe giving it a bit of a lick, just exploring kind of maybe how it might feel before they're maybe thinking about getting it closer to the mouth, giving it a bit of a kiss. Some children love a little bit of a kiss, see what's going on, and exploring kind of that mouth feel. And then if feeling confident, maybe then encourage, why don't we try it? But also trying it together as well and going through that. But I think big process, probably one of the key things is role modelling and making sure that actually as a parent you're doing that yourself. If you're encouraging your child to try something new, that you're doing it together and sharing that experience.
Sure. So
yeah, I think another thing at 7 years old, you might find that they're quite into charting. If they want to get involved in, actually, they're recognizing I do want to try some different things. I know I need to eat a little bit healthier. I mean, that's one thing you probably need to negotiate at 7. You can have a chat to them about it and try and get them to understand that maybe their diet isn't that healthy, and talk about healthy diets, and maybe there are some things that they'd be prepared to do, because you do need to get them to commit to want to actually try things. And then if you've established that, okay, he or she is up for trying something, then children do like keeping a log of what they're doing. And we've had some success in the past with getting children to journal their journey in trying different things. So they can decide, what kind of things do they like at the moment, and are there foods that are similar to those, that have similar kind of properties, textures, colours, that they might be up for trying, because there can be similarities, and they think, maybe that food's not so bad. If it's something like vegetables, and they're okay with having, what's a good example? Like they don't mind sweet corn, then you'd probably look at something, okay, what has a similar texture to sweet corn, or something that, because it's quite a hard texture, maybe something like peas, or is it a similar sort of texture that might be a little bit crunchy, or maybe peppers might be something a little bit crunchy, or small chopped up carrots, or something that's a similar colour that they could try, that that sort of helps with mapping what they might like to do in trying different things. And then they could kind of keep a log of it, take a picture or draw a picture of it, and see why, if they liked it or if they didn't like it. I think sometimes it's good to get children to try things, and it doesn't, if they're up for trying it and using the exposure technique that Sarah was talking about, then it's about no judgment. If they don't like it, they don't like it, that's fine. But if they like it and they think it's okay, then maybe we might be up for trying it again. So so that can be helpful. If they're really fussy like that, if they're really sort of like, I'm not even going to try anything, then slow steps and sort of doing a little bit of planning, and maybe being realistic as well as a parent to think, well, this is a long-term thing, and it might take a long time to actually even get them to eat 3 or 4 different new vegetables. It might take months, for some kids who've got very particular restrictive feelings around foods.
Sure.
So.
And can I just be clear then, in terms of like you saying the steps, so you touch it and and so if a child like touches it and they're like, I don't like how it feels, so then what so you're, as a parent, you say, okay, you don't like how it feels, fine, we'll try something else? Or do you persevere? Or do you see, you're like, oh no, it actually feels okay to me? Like, do you see what I mean? What did you do in that moment?
I think certainly, and we know from kind of some of the research, actually, the more times you expose a child to a food and certainly tasting it, and there's lots of different numbers that get bounded around between 15 to 20 times. Right. So actually, it's about it becoming familiar failure to the child. So actually not giving up first time, but then also not putting that pressure on that's got to happen straight away. So it might be that you try something different, but maybe come back to that particular food. Maybe when the child's feeling maybe a bit more confident, maybe has, as Emma was mentioning, a texture that's quite similar. And once it might be that if they like a slice of bread, that you then move them on to something like a pita bread or a breadstick, so that actually you work within the same food group and then expand from there if they're particularly fussy.
Sure.
Rather than going, I think certainly fruits and vegetables are normally the more tricky group to get in because they look so different, their textures are so different. So it might be starting off quite small with a food, a group that's kind of more dry and the texture's more consistent, and it's likely to be the same every time you give it to them.
Great, fantastic. Listeners, I'd just like to thank you very much for getting in touch. Appreciate your comments and questions. We've just had some comments in relation to positive comments about, it's great to hear you talking about that babies eating home-cooked food rather than buying baby foods from supermarkets and things like that. So they're just saying excellent. And another thing about hiding fruit and vegetables in foods. So
that's a good question.
They don't necessarily realise they're eating it. So, but then that doesn't necessarily then set them up for when they're a bit more independent. So, well, let me put it to you. let me touch that one.
I mean, I think it's a timely question because as Sarah was just talking about becoming familiar, when you're hiding fruits and vegetables, children won't know they're in there, and then they're not becoming familiar with them. So it's if you're worried about your child getting enough nutrition in, hiding them, you can do that, but then have them on the side as well. So, if that's that's a sort of a compromise. But generally, we would say if you really want to achieve a change, they have to see them there, they have to experience them rather than hiding them.
Sure. And then just the other one was in relation to, so it says, Assalamu alaikum, how to keep kids from sugary fizzy drinks and fast food.
That's the one that's close to my heart with
definitely.
the fizzy drinks, because we were talking about that before we came on. And I, because I've worked very closely with the oral health promotion team, we promote positive dental health and good dental health practices through the Family Food First, and they've got a program called Healthy Smiles that they run in Luton in nurseries, because we don't have very good oral health for under fives here in Luton. It's pretty shocking, and dental health, poor dental health is totally preventable. It's all about good dental hygiene, obviously, but it's about what you eat and drink, and trying to keep sugar attacks to, a maximum of 4 a day, and that's your meals mostly. So keeping the message is keep sugar to meal times, and sugary drinks is one of those things that children, that's how they tend to actually create decay, is through having sugary drinks. It's one of the classic dietary issues, and I would say starting early and actually not offering sugary drinks to your child if they're under 2, just milk and water. Maybe you can consider after they're a bit older, you can start to give them things like juice or water, because unfortunately once you've got the taste for it, it's very difficult. And when children are under 2, they're really difficult to negotiate with. When they're older, they start to understand this is a treat. We don't have them very often. But I would say keep sugary drinks out of the house, because they are just empty calories. You're not getting anything from them, and they're terrible, terrible, terrible for your teeth. So unfortunately, the advice is you're just going to have to stop it. You're going to have to put boundaries in place and say, or only have them at a meal time. So you can have, 1 sugary drink a day, maybe, or 2, depending on how many you're having. So if you're having them all the time, then maybe you want to slowly cut down. That can be an easier thing to manage, but keep them to meal times. So just have them at mealtimes and maybe one glass at mealtimes and limit it and slowly cut down.
But also thinking about who else is in the house as well. And as Emma mentioned, just by having them there and the foods and drinks in the house is always going to be that temptation. But also, I guess, if you're giving the message that we want to try and limit the number of times, but maybe the parents then continually drinking that throughout the day, then that can sometimes be very difficult for the child to then, I guess, adopt that healthy habit as well. So doing it all together, making sure the changes that you're making as a family.
Yeah.
Awesome. And then just in relation to the other part of the question was about fast food. So in terms of that kind of fast food culture that we have, I mean, as you know, you're dealing with a lot of families, you must see quite a lot of that. How, if at all, is there any strategies around fast food and how to decrease the amount of fast food that we're eating?
Well, I think it's looking at the reasons why you're accessing fast food, because a lot of the time it's because maybe we haven't got food in the house, we haven't prepared things, we do have limited time. So it probably is a little bit of planning involved in trying to avoid going to takeaways. So if it's something you want to try and change, then looking at alternative options that you can have in the house, even if it is frozen food, that's probably better. And you can adapt things, so if you're going out to have chicken and chips, then maybe think about what you can get in the house, because you could have frozen chicken nuggets and chips with peas, and that's probably going to be a better option and probably less fat than you would from your chicken shop. So I mean, it's about, I think it's about realistic changes, really, because obviously it would be better to try and cut down on your takeaways and maybe only have them sort of every so often and as a treat. But if it's, if you're living a hectic family life, and you've got to be realistic about what things you can change and make small changes. So if it is about getting sort of frozen foods in, then that's fine. And then looking at how you can try and cook some food at home or make some shortcuts. I don't know if you have anything else to add.
I think it's looking at kind of asking, as you mentioned earlier, why is the reason that we're eating the foods. Is it a distraction? Is it due to boredom? Is there a reason why that's happening? Or is it in place of a meal? Is there particular places that might kind of encourage us to choose those foods? So just sometimes the environment that we're living in, for example, just walking past that chip shop on the way back from school, or is it sort of walking down to a local high street and you get that smell, and actually is there a different route that you could take to try and actually support not wanting that food? And I think it's again going back to making small changes. If it's something that's ever present in your life, I think as a family, I mean, that's with anything. If you're going to make any changes, going back to fussy eating, I think, thinking about what's your family life, what's things going on at home? Like, are you living with relatives? All of that sort of stuff. Because if you're going to make a change, you're going to try and change your child's behavior or your family's behavior, you really need to plan how that's going to go. Because to be successful in making any behavior change, it's about being consistent and repeating it. And that's seen throughout the literature. It's one of the things that a lot of parents don't get that message often enough, and we're not very good at doing it. So planning to make sure you can try and do that is, I think, one of the first things. It's one of the things I always talk about with my patients. You're going to go home, think about what you're going to do, talk to your other half, talk to if anyone else is involved in childcare or anything like that, to make sure that everyone's on the same page, so we're all having a consistent approach. And it would be the same with takeaways as well. Like, as a family, you need to make that decision. We're going to cut down. And so everyone has to be on board.
Sure, fantastic. Listeners, you're listening to Inspire FM on 105.1 FM, and we're here discussing fussy eating and children's diets on the Health and Fitness Show. This program is going out live on Thursday the 16th of January 2020, and you can get involved by text or WhatsApp on 07779 481822, and we're being joined by not one but two paediatric dietitians, so you're very welcome to get in touch and let us know your thoughts as well. Obviously, in the news at the moment, there's lots about vegan diets, vegetarian, eat less meat is good for the environment. It's very much in the news at the moment. So I couldn't have two dietitians in front of me and not ask them their views on this. So what is your professional thoughts on that phenomenon?
Vegan diets. Well, it's very, very popular at the moment. I mean, we are actually in Veganuary, Suliman.
Okay.
So,
yeah. I missed that one.
I know. We didn't know. It's a new month on the calendar. I think eating less meat is a good thing to do. A lot of people eat too much meat.
Yeah.
We don't need to eat the amount of meat that we eat to get the protein we need and to get the nutrition we need. However, that's being said, I mean, vegetarian diets can be very healthy and probably do have are sustainable in terms of the environment. And the British Dietetic Association has also agreed that vegan diets are can be healthy and can be manageable from across the age range. I think a caveat I would put on that is that it's a recognition that, firstly, with vegan diets, it's a very extreme diet. You're cutting out one whole food group, and that's your milk and dairy foods, and you're also cutting out quite a lot of foods from your protein food category, and you're missing out on a lot of nutrients. So B vitamin 12, iodine, iron, zinc. There's a lot of things that you need to be aware of. So you need to be able to plan your diets appropriately. You probably need to be very good at cooking from scratch. So and when you're talking about raising children on a vegan diet, there are risks there as well, because children in the first 5 years of life are going through one of the biggest growth spurts that they go through until they go through puberty. So they need a lot of nutrition, a lot of energy. And we also know, as we've been talking about, they naturally are quite fussy and their diets can fluctuate from day to day. So I think if you're going to embark on that process and you've got young children, you want to raise them as vegan, I think you should be really organised and really into cooking, and you need to consider that they might need to have supplements as well to make sure they're getting everything that they need. So there are some caveats there, I think, to whether or not it's a healthy diet for all, because I think there are some limitations there for some population groups.
Mm-hmm. And so just just conscious of the time and just want to make sure that we've covered all of the relevant bits that we wanted to. So I guess the one thing I just wanted to touch on again was around some of the practical support that's available for families. I know you mentioned the videos around lunchboxes and things like that. So can you just touch on a bit more around best place to go for further advice and support?
Sure. Well, I guess we should point everyone towards the things like the NHS Choices website, Change for Life.
For your vegan diets, the Vegan Society is a really, really good website. And
First Steps Nutrition, actually, so a lot of listeners might not know about that site. You can Google them. So that's a charity that particularly has got new, resources on there for pregnant women and advice on formula milks and
it's got some really practical suggestions. There's lots of pictures on there around packed lunch ideas as well, and recipes that you can get. The Let's Get Cooking website is also quite good for recipe ideas.
Yeah. And we've also just released, the Family Food First programme has just released some packed lunch videos. So they are particularly targeting children in nursery and preschool, because we do have some settings we work with that have children that bring in packed lunches. There's a series of different videos that look at recipes and making up healthy packed lunches, and a video that talks about what's in a healthy packed lunch. So those are on our website and they're on our Twitter feed. You can find them on Vimeo if you just look up Family Food First. But I don't know if there's a way for us to link them to your
we can
site?
We'll add the links to the bottom of the Facebook page.
Excellent.
We'll do that. That's no problem at all. Just the other thing to mention is our friends at Flying Start have Henry programs starting this month, so they've just asked me to remind listeners about that. There's a number of different Henry programs, and you can go onto the Flying Start website to find out more about that. And every family receives a free Henry kit, which includes everything you'll need during the program and helpful resources as well. So I think the important thing to remember is as parents, you said there, didn't you? Almost every child has a element of fussy eating, and so we shouldn't kind of despair at that. It's not necessarily a reflection of being a bad parent, but rather it's just the nature of children. And
I'd say don't sweat it. That's one of the big things. Don't sweat it. Most children are growing fine. That's the thing that we see. I mean, we see some particular children in our clinics that aren't growing but that, as well, but most children would be growing well.
But also to put yourself in your child's shoes as well. So think about how would it feel if I was sat there at a mealtime, and is it fun? Is it positive? And would I want to have the same mealtime again?
Sure, absolutely.
I'd say another big takeaway message, because maybe we haven't probably gone through some of the real practical tips about just general fussy eating, but a takeaway I would say is sharing meals with your children as much as possible. So all eating the same food and having shared family meals. It's a real struggle, I think, for families, nowadays, because people are working and maybe shift working, and we often don't get that opportunity to sit down and share a meal together. But it's children learn so much from their parents, and there's loads of really good evidence that if you can continue that habit as children get older into adolescence, it has a really big impact on their health and well-being. You see children have reduced rates of self-harm, they've got better confidence, and they eat better. They tend to eat more fruits and vegetables because it's that time to talk about your day and share things, and it's protected family time. So I think that's a big message from me about sharing family meals. If you can do it at least once a week, then great. More, fantastic, but at least once a week, something to aim for.
Absolutely. And one of the things you mentioned quite a lot at the beginning was around role modelling, and so I was in fear of, so now I'm going to have to just drink water. So, so I was thinking, but I hadn't necessarily, because in your mind I think you think children's drinks and food, and then you think parents' drinks and food, but actually we should all just be kind of sharing the same foods.
I mean, look,
which is helpful.
Yes, I think it's good to do that. But hey, if you go out for a meal or having and letting your children have a sweet drink, then I think it's about balance. We were talking about that as well, weren't we, Sarah? That it's not what was it you were saying? It was about no covert
sort of really restricting.
Yes.
Because in reality, I think it has to be about a balance. And, I think if children will access foods and drinks outside the home as well. So they need to be able to learn how to, I guess, balance themselves between having treats and having foods, but not all the time.
Great. Yeah. Perfect. Again, very much appreciate you giving up your time this evening to be with us. We'd love to have you back in the future to talk about any work that you're up to, any campaigns. We have got quite a busy schedule. So next week, Fahad Mati and the main man will be back in the studio. If you do have any ideas on topics you'd like us to talk about, please do let us know. But until next time, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Thank you for listening to our podcast. We stream our daily broadcast on inspirefm.org. You'll find all our daily updates on our social media at Inspire FM Luton.